end. So welcome everyone to Shared Histories, continuing the conversation part 2. Today's event is the second of 3 webinars that we here at the Gilbo Center for Public History have planned in connection to our ongoing project to document the UL community's experiences of and responses to COVID-19 and the movement for Black lives in 2020. This event also builds upon the university's week-long public dialogue back in September on race, equality, and social justice in our city and beyond. My name is Marissa Petru, and I am director of the Gilbo Center for Public History and assistant professor of public history here at UL. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that those of us in Lafayette are on the ancestral land of the Attakapaishak, the Chitimacha, the Appaloosa, and the Avogadro tribes. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. And I'd also like to acknowledge the peoples of African descent who worked this land when it was part of the Mouton family's sugar plantation, Okopal. For those of you who are only learning about the Gilbo Center for the first time, I'll just provide a very brief summary of what we do. We're housed in the Department of History, Geography, and Philosophy, and we support institutions of culture and education in dismantling white supremacy by drawing on our strengths as historians. We're very motivated by what has clearly become an urgent need to break silences and to unbury the knowledge, as student Delisha Daniels described it. At our webinar in September, community organizers and social justice advocates, Dr. Phoebe Hayes, Skyra Rideau, and Corey St. Ewart spoke with us about the Black experience in Acadiana, historically and in the wake of the murder of Trayford Pellerin, and provided us with the opportunity to brainstorm next steps to help move the needle towards social justice. Today's webinar builds on this discussion by centering the student experience here at UL and thinking about the significance of intersectionality to conversations on social justice. Our panelists include Lauren Brooks, president of the UL NAACP, and Michael Griffin, president of the Black Student Union. I'm so grateful to our panelists for taking the time to participate in today's event, and I'm super excited to hear what they have to say, and I'm sure you are as well. So now I'm going to turn things over to our moderator, Trevian Ambrose. Trevian, who goes by Trey, is a junior history major here at UL. He is both executive director of the big event and an undergraduate research assistant at the Gilbo Center for Public History. He is especially passionate about researching the lives and experiences of the Black community in Southern Louisiana to counter a single narrative. So thank you, Trey, for moderating our discussion this evening, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Petru, for that introduction and those words. And once again, y'all, welcome to Shared Histories, Continuing the Conversation, Part 2. My name is Trevian Ambrose, and I have the pleasure of being today's moderator for this conversation. It is in our intentions for this conversation and the space to speak about the experiences of social justice and inclusion-centered organizations and the students who are behind them. And so for today's panelists includes the presidents from 2 student organizations here at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Lauren Brooks, who's the president of the UL chapter of the NAACP, and Michael Griffin, the president of the UL Black Student Union. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Michael, for being a part of this conversation. Today's webinar will, of course, be divided into 2 parts, a dialogue and a forum. The dialogue will feature Lauren, Michael, and I participating in questions that will produce this dialogue, and the forum, which will be open for everyone to ask their questions at the end. If you have any questions or any burning questions that you wish to have answered, please feel free to put them in the chat, and once we reach the forum section of this conversation, we will answer them for you. And so without further ado and without further explanation, Shared Histories, Continuing the Conversations, Part 2. So Lauren and Michael, to start us off, could you please introduce yourself and the mission of your organization?
Okay, I'll go first. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction, Trey. This is an honor to be here. Like they said before, I am Michael Griffin. I'm the president of the UL Black Student Union, and our mission statement is to stimulate the intellectual, political, cultural, and social growth of all minority students at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, focusing primarily on people of color. We achieve this through programming, elevating involvement such as general meetings, community service, and the unification of organizations centered and catered to the people of color on and off campus.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Lauren Brooks. As they said, thank y'all for that lovely introduction. I am the president of UL NAACP, and our mission statement is to the mission of the NAACP Youth and College Division shall be to inform youth of the problems affecting African Americans and other racial and ethnic minorities, to advance the economic, education, social, and political status of African Americans and other racial ethnic minorities and their harmonious cooperations with other peoples, to stimulate an appreciation of the African diaspora and other people of color's contribution to civilization, and to develop an intelligent, militant, and effective youth leadership.
Thank you, both of you, for providing those mission statements. And so before we speak about the current projects of your organizations, can you share with us what this current moment mean for you as an individual, this current moment of social justice, of change?
For me, this movement is definitely about awareness. There have been way too many Black bodies slain for this to go unnoticed. And I'm discouraged that it really took this long for, America to kind of wake up and realize what's going on in our nation and what's going on overseas and what we are and who America really is. But we're at the point where, people are becoming more aware, and I'm grateful for that. And that's all I can really ask of them.
I completely agree with what Lauren said. Living in a time now, as you know, in most cases, history repeats itself. So we're in a different era, in a different generation. So I love the initiative that I see so much coming from Black and brown people, as well as our allies, trying to get to a place where we can all feel inclusive and feel safe and understand, and we have that right and to be equal ultimately as American people. As you can see, this is something that isn't just a problem within America, but it is something that is global. So us having these conversations constantly, trying to not necessarily normalize the actions in which is taking place, but really normalizing the push and the awareness towards it to make that change is the place where I feel most safe and understand that these things are happening, but what is the change? Where can we go from there? So as of right now, that's probably where I would say I'm at when it comes to the social justice that's going on right now. It's really just like Lauren said, bringing forth that awareness.
Definitely. And I truly agree with both of you, speaking about that awareness, speaking about that inclusion, speaking about that it's not just simply a regional issue or a national issue, but it's also a global issue as we're seeing across this world. And so definitely, as we spoke, as Dr. Petru spoke about the Gibbo Center's previous webinar, we spoke about the experiences of Black folk, primarily in Acadiana, in South Louisiana. One of the panelists discussed the concept of intersectionality, that interweaving of those different experiences, where we can all come together at that table and ensure that everyone's at that table. Through your organization's work, how can or how should the university ensure that everyone is at the table, those voices are at the table?
I believe it's more so about being heard and actually being listened to. I believe that the university always has a listening ear. However, there aren't always solutions. And sometimes it feels that it's on us as the minorities, as the Black or the brown students, to come up with the solutions to fix the things that we see are not advancing us at this university. So I believe just having them actually listen and be attentive and come up with responses for themselves rather than us promoting or coming forth with ideas. I think that it's something that we could really enhance just to make sure that we're all at the same table and we're all on the same page while we're at the table.
I completely agree, Lauren. Really just being inclusive and having that table where everybody can sit in and we can come together and be transparent with one another. A lot of times I think in the past people were maybe a little scared or leery to touch on what's going on because they felt as though because I'm not Black or brown, I don't have these problems that we face on a day-to-day basis. So having them at that table and hearing everybody's concerns and it being so organic, I think then that's where that acknowledgement came into play and say, well, as an ally, what can I do to aid in this progression, to get equal rights for all? So I think that alone is something that the university's been doing quite well with doing since the pandemic and things of that nature. And I commend everybody who's been a part of it.
Thank you for that. And, asking those questions, as we all know, the work of DEI, IDEA, and DEIA is definitely one that is, of course, necessary as we're looking at those power structures. Asking those questions, like you said, Michael, what can I do? Where can I go? And Lauren, definitely, asking about hearing, listening. We may not have the solutions now, but we can work together to get those solutions for the future. Definitely, and thank you all for that point. And of course, during this summer and the fall and even now, there have been several protests and rallies and marches that were held all across South Louisiana, across our region, across our state, across our country, truly. And some even took place on or near our university's campus in response to the murders of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Trayford Pellerin. But violence against Black folk, as we all know, is not new. Why do you think the pandemic in some way has heightened that awareness of the struggle for social justice and human rights?
I think the pandemic brought it to its attention because a lot of people were idle. In a lot of instances, when things are at a standstill, people are inside, that's a time for people to really kind of sit, marinate, and observe what's really going on. When the world shut down at one point, and pretty much everybody on this call has never experienced something like that in our lifetime. So understanding that, the world took a time where we all were doing the same thing consecutively for days and days at a time. And we saw these things happening, it was something that people couldn't just turn a blind eye to, because at that point, it was the only thing that you did see. So the good that came out of the pandemic was the awareness that brought us to where we are today, is to have these conversations. Of course, there's all the negative connotations that come with it. But honestly, I think it's the idle aspect of everybody being in the same position at the same time is what brought forth this opportunity for us to have conversations and for us to see, okay, if this is what's going on, how can we go about attacking it? Where do we need to start? What do we need to address? What do we need to research, and so forth?
I think also like what Mike is saying is definitely true, but I also think a lot of people looked at it from a health aspect. They went in as going to critique the movement, trying to figure out why people were so persistent to have protests when, there's COVID and you need 6 feet apart, from the next person that's next to you. But then you kind of go in and you're like, okay, well, I see why these people are so adamant, why they're so persistent, why they want their voice heard. And it's like, yes, we're in a pandemic, but we're all taking precautions, as many precautions as possible to have safe protests. I know where I'm from, a small town 3 hours north of here, I led a protest in my small hometown, but we made sure that everyone had a mask. We made sure that people, if we were standing around, if we were congregating, that it was 6 feet apart, but people were still out there to hear what had to be said, to hear the changes that needed to be done, and to listen to how minorities feel within communities that aren't necessarily catering to their needs.
Definitely. And, as we're thinking about this, and you definitely answered my next question, so thank you for that. But definitely, speaking about those opportunities, speaking about that word, the health, we're thinking about it in the sense of, I can't be reminded, those 3 pandemics that we as a country are battling. Of course, COVID, one pandemic, economic crisis, another pandemic, and race, that civil unrest, that strive for social justice, another pandemic. Definitely speaking about those experiences of different people and that moment that we find ourselves in right now, being idle. As Michael said, the world stopped for a moment in time. We couldn't but think through about our neighbors, about ourselves, about our family members. Thinking through that, definitely allows us to process what's happening now, as Lauren pointed out. But definitely, thank you for that. And, additionally in the summer, we notice and we witness and we read our university's president and the president of the UL system emailed the university community about inclusion and diversity, the need to strive to be a more inclusive community, a more inclusive campus, and a more inclusive university. And additionally, the university symbolically marked a Pride Month and Juneteenth with the ringing of the bell. And UL's official Instagram participated in hashtag Blackout Tuesday. How do we account for racial equity and inclusion and the need for more of these open conversations at the university?
So I believe the university did, I commend them for honoring Pride Month and Juneteenth, and they've taken strides to have conversations, especially within a pandemic and especially with us kind of being tired of Zoom calls, but they're still, making those things happen. However, I think we have to make sure that everyone is included within those conversations. There are certain conversations where there could be a certain faculty member that's left out or that's not on that call for that day, but what was said that day was so vital to their ear, yet they missed it. And these conversations aren't always recorded or publicized, or people aren't taking notes. So I definitely think in order to keep these conversations going, you have to have the right people, but you also have to have the right student leaders in place and have people who are willing to continue their work once we all graduate.
I agree with you on that, Lauren. Really, ultimately, it's about that legacy too. We've put in so much work, and it's such a different time what we're going through. Since I've been here at UL, we've went through, the past presidential election. We have a current election going on. I've seen and witnessed a lot of things that has been dealt with in regard to race, sexuality, religion, all things of that nature on campus that has brought attention to many people's eyes. So like she said before, having the right people at the right time on those calls is really key to the growth and understanding of what true diversity and inclusion is all about. We can continue to preach it and push for it, for admissions and even while you're here on campus, but in actuality, what are we truly doing that is showing, putting forth that, this is something that we really pride ourselves on as Raging Cajuns, and a lot of times, I've spoken to some of my my members of my organization, just general body members, and they understand that we push for this diversity, but they still don't feel it. They feel as though it's just something that, oh, we have to do it. In response to like when our President Salvo, when he did his open letter and he spoke about what was going on, the chiming of the bell, those are great things. And it's something that should be done selflessly. It shouldn't have to be in response or reaction to what is going on. And I think that is a big thing, especially for me. I'm all about understanding what's going on, but let's not always react to something because of something that has happened. Let it happen before something happens. And I think then that's something that we have to break. And once that breaks, then I feel like we can really and truly move forward with a progression that is organic. Everybody's on the same page and everybody understands where we're going to next.
And if I could add to that, it definitely is everything that Michael is saying is so perfect. From the looks of it, it sometimes seems that the university has a lot of performative acts, and it's like for the moment we care. While social justice is hot and that's a topic that's trending, we're talking about it. These conversations are going. We have these 5-year plans that are being talked about constantly. But you have to also realize that the university within 5 years, so much can change. This 5-year plan, though it may be great for today's time and today's students, in 5 years, that might not be what the people need. That might not be their concerns or where they feel that they lack diversity and inclusion. So it's really about, I'd say, semester by semester growth, just assessing where your students are, how they feel as minorities on a PWI. Are they feeling safe? Do they feel like they have the resources to go speak to a counselor, or do they feel like they have the correct advisors? Just making sure that they're, kind of content at the university.
Definitely. And, I think it recalls our conversation before the webinar, that we're continuing these conversations. We're not starting this conversation, but we're continuing it. And, thinking about those words, that what both of you said, there's a degree of authenticity that must be had when we're having these conversations, when we're having this work be done, when we're actually beginning that planning, that programming. And like you said, Lauren, people change, students change in 5 years. The world has definitely changed in what, 9 months? You know, definitely having those openness, having the right people at the table, like Michael said, definitely speaks volumes, especially if we want to move forward from just simply being an inclusive campus to saying a more inclusive campus by using that term more, saying that we have more work to do. And so definitely thank y'all for that point. And additionally, it alluded to my next question, which is with the university, of course. Furthermore, the university sponsored several forums like this, several town halls and several webinars about the Black experience here at the university, here at UL Lafayette. Regionally, and of course, additionally, nationally, some of these conversations. But unfortunately, one of these events was Zoom bombed. Certainly, we cannot have these conversations about inclusion, diversity, accessibility, and equity without a safe space, without that safe atmosphere. How can we create or organize a safe space, whether that's in the time of COVID virtually or after COVID in person or physical place? How can we ensure that we have a space that is organized?
I think us having that safe space, it's something that I've been preaching for quite a long time now, is having that physical safe space and understanding, housing all of these organizations that are Black and brown minority organizations. We need a space where we can go, come together and feel safe. I was just speaking to a few of my friends, actually, I want to say about last week or so, and we were talking about how our student union isn't really for students. It's mainly just offices and buildings, the offices that work for the university, and they do a lot of renting out to outside people, but we don't have an area where just a bunch of students can come together and just enjoy each other's time. I've been to the Southwestern Black Leadership Conference 3 years now, and they have a whole multicultural center, and it has a place where, you can go there, you can unwind. They have pool tables and recreational things you can do. There's places where you can watch movies. They have things you can rent out there. And I feel like, at our university, we have such a big population of minority students. And the fact that we do not have our own place for house is a problem. And I think that right there, that'll be a good step in the right direction. A lot of times we feel we have to go above and beyond just to have our meetings, especially now with programming, during this pandemic. And excuse my French, but it's been hell trying to plan and have effective big events and stuff like that. There's, all kinds of different things that we want to do that continues to shine a positive light on the university as well as in our organizations, but we can't because of a pandemic. But at the same time, it's like, how are we to even speak about this? We shouldn't have to constantly, oh, let's hop on this call, because we don't have that area or that location for us to have meetings. If we had a physical safe space that was housed just for us, I don't think it's segregating ourselves off or anything like that. I know that might be a controversial question or understanding, but in times like this, this is what we need. It's a desire, it's a want, it's something that will also continue to push for retention on campus. Seeing more individuals that look like me around campus, it's a beautiful thing, but how are we going to keep them? That's where the student organizations come into play. That's what we're supposed to do as student leaders. We push these people to excel. But if we can't have a physical place to do that, then how are we to do that? For instance, membership this semester, null and void. You have your board and cabinets and councils. That's it. Literally planning events for the same people. I can honestly say on this call now, with the administration, there's Theodore Foster here, you have Ruben Henderson, you have Demarginalizing Perez, all these individuals, I see them on a regular basis in our meetings, but there's no students because there's a lack thereof, because they see it as, well, we're in a pandemic. So it's so much that's going on right now, and it's frustrating. And I get lost at words sometimes in regard to it, but it's just, that physical safe space is what I keep pushing for, and I will continue to push for even beyond my graduation.
I definitely agree with Mike. We've all, as I know, as like a Black Caucus, what we created kind of this summer, we've been working about having a safe space and making sure that our voices are heard, making sure that we have the adequate counselors. There's in the counseling center, I believe a ratio, there's 4 counselors, there's 1 who is African American. There are no minorities in the counseling office yet, especially in these times, we're away from our families, we're dealing with online school, we're dealing with personal things. And if you really don't have a counselor to go talk to, even if there is just one minority or African American, that's a lot for that counselor to deal with. If we pride ourselves as a university on diversity and inclusion, we should be able to see that across campus. We should be able to have those safe spaces. As far as creating a safe space online, that is something that that's really going to have to come with trial and error. This is all new to all of us. What we've kind of been doing is, for our general body meetings, we kind of keep it at a, hey, DM us for the link, so that we know who's coming to the meeting. Or I know BSU, y'all did an event not too long ago and y'all had, or I'm sorry, it was Alpha. Y'all did y'all's voter registration informational, and y'all did that as like a Google Drive doc, and you had to sign your name before you got the link. I think as right now, though it is a lot of work for the organization to do, that's one of the safest things for us to do. I've heard about the Zoom bombings. I know BSU had one, and that was so traumatic for us because we had a meeting that exact same night and everyone was like, whoa, is BSU okay? How are they doing? And it was like, oh my gosh, like, are we next? And we'd heard like an organization the week before had the same thing happen, but this also wasn't the first time. So it was kind of like, does the university hear us? Do they care? I mean, if this has happened multiple times and now it seems like we're attacking, organizations who kind of cater to the minorities or the organizations and groups that aren't like popular, such as like maybe like Glass or whatever, if they were to experience that, it's like, does the university care about these minority organizations? Do we feel involved and do we feel safe even as organizations on campus?
And, definitely, thank you both for talking about this, creating that space, like you said, it's going to be trial and error. We don't know how this is going to look. This is going to look very different, definitely in our world, in our time, with a virtual space, but ensuring that, when events or meetings, whether it's student organizations or webinars or anything that the university or students are going to, that of course they feel safe, that they feel that that area, that time is there for them, and that they're not going to be attacked, definitely speaks truth to answer that, definitely. And then, forming a multicultural center. I think, of course, that's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful space to allow students to just be, just to be. And definitely, it's leading us, of course, to our next question. But before we go to our next question, definitely just thinking about that, thinking about what that would look like here at UL. What would that entail? Definitely, of course, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking through that, but definitely, what would that be for those students, for those faculty members, for those staff members, those professionals here at our university, a space to just be. So your work as student organizations are, of course, a vital part of student life at our university by providing people of different backgrounds and different experiences, once again, a place to be. How has the pandemic, and I know that you kind of talked about this, of course, with attendance dropping, that new membership is null and void. And I think if you would ask pretty much every student organization here on campus, we're all facing that. We're all asking those questions. Can we even be applicable to a time right now? What is our work? What does it look like moving forward with that? But how has the pandemic altered or challenged your organization's programming or engagements within the university community, reaching out to those students, and even particularly reaching out to those first-year students here on campus?
So for us, just like Michael said, membership has not been the strongest. However, we do have a lot of freshmen that are interested in our organization. I would say we've had about 9 freshmen pay their dues. So that's definitely been like a blessing, and it's something like we love having them on our calls, and they're very eager to be a part of an organization, especially coming here as freshmen. However, it's like we haven't had any time to engage with them. We've only been able to have one event, and that was our voter registration drive. However, I've been a little antsy about events because my priority for my executive board and for my members is that they stay safe. I'm not promoting anything, any going out unless it has purpose. So the things that we're doing, they have purpose. Our voter informational, that had purpose. We were definitely pushing for not only voter registration, but are you aware of what's on your sample ballot? You know, do you know these amendments? Do you know who's running for senator? Those type of things. But the pandemic has really like put a halt to all of that. My executive board and I went through an entire summer of planning to get to the university and not really know if we were going to be able to put on events, whether or not we were going to do virtual events, whether or not we were actually going to be able to actually have an in-person meeting, which we have not been able to. So it's just definitely been like a stress, especially with I'll say UL NAACP, we're newly in compliance with nationals and with state. So we're growing in that area as well, not just only our UL NAACP branch, we're kind of just growing with everyone. And from nationals to state to, you know, even back to us, it's just been a lot of like confusion, commotion, a lot of this is on pause right now, and this is how we're going to do this right now. Or, you know, this is not normally how we do it, but this is how it's going to be. As a president, I've never been able to go to regional conference meetings. I've never got to interact with the other NAACP presidents that are around state. Yes, we have a group message, but that doesn't suffice. In-person things are just so much more like beneficial for, I believe, human interaction in general. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, Lauren. Like I said before, you know, it has been hell to try and put on events, you know, this semester, especially like for my organ, specifically the Black Student Union. We've had an explosive last 2 years where our membership has skyrocketed. We've been able to impact the university in so many different fields, from game day experience to social injustice to being informed on your health, voting, you name it. We try to do as much as we can to continue to unify minority students here on campus. So for us, you know, this has been a big halt just in our growth and our pledge basically for, you know, to the university and aiding in the best way that we can. So it's been trialing. It's been another added stress that has taken a toll on my board in particular. You know, it's something that we meet about, you know, on calls, and we're talking like, what can we do? Like currently right now we have events, you know, we have bigger events that we throw health extravaganzas. We do our Essentials Black Expo, which would be the third year we're doing it. You know, we have a programming for the entire Black History Month that we work with our council organizations for. These are things that we plan a semester in advance. So the problem that we're facing, like Lauren said, is, you know, we planned all during the summer semester, you know, in preparation for the fall, and a lot of the stuff is falling through, and it's not our fault or the university. You know, we're in a pandemic. You know, for instance, like with our health fair, you know, we're trying to you know, each year we want to continue to make things grow. We're big on community outreach. We want to get out into the community to bring, you know, alumni back to the university, show that, you know, the University of Louisiana loves their community as well, because they play a definitive factor in everything that goes on campus as well. So, you know, we're reaching out to them, but, you know, they're leery, you know, to attend events or wanting to volunteer or wanting to set up a booth or anything like that at one of our events because of the pandemic. You know, everybody wants to put their safety first, which is the utmost respect, and that's the best thing that we can do. You know, like Lauren was saying, you know, as a president, you know, that's on the top of our list. You know, we don't want to have an outbreak on campus. It's already been going on. You know, we're trying to keep that under control, under wraps, and we don't want it to continue to happen. So if that means that we don't go on campus, then so be it. I'd rather the safety of my members over anything else, because the event can come next semester and the semester following. That's not the issue. And I know everybody wants to continue to have events, and it sucks as student leaders because that's what we look forward to. That's when we get to show off what we've been doing. We're trying to give back to the community. We want to bring forth, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, even seniors that want to get involved their last semester to a year. That gives them that opportunity to get involved, see what else is out there besides going to class, going to a meet, it branches them out. It gives them that versatility that they need for the workspace and, getting ready to be societal human beings. So ultimately it's been hard. It's been tough. And even on the perspective of, the university too, administration, I know it's been tough on you guys as well, just being able to accept and deny events that's going on. I know there's been issues with that, like going from programming from student organizations to administration, because there's so many different guidelines we have to follow now through the CDC. And, I think a lot of times from the outside looking in, people fail to realize that, they're always wanting to, they're doing this, that, and the third, but, they're going through a pandemic too. We're all trying to adjust. And I think ultimately this is why we have to continue to work as a unified front in interaction so that we can continue to make the right decisions for the masses.
And, definitely, especially as we're all having these questions, and even, as student organizations, the unknown, the summer, usually you go home in the summer, you're programming, you're planning, you're thinking about what can we do in the fall? What can we start doing in the spring? And definitely, it does speak volume, adjusting, going virtual, saying that we're not going to do in-person events because of keeping that safety in mind definitely goes a long way. And I definitely thank you, because on my end, those decisions, of course, have not been easy. And those decisions, of course, you feel bad, but you know that you're trying to do the best you can. And definitely thank you all so much for speaking about that. And so definitely, additionally, with the global and the national conversations that we're having, something that has become centered in those conversations are the removal of statues or Confederate statues or monuments of figures or individuals with a complicated past, a past about systemic racism, settler colonialism, and those roots about decolonizing public spaces, decolonizing history, and of course, renaming university buildings. What do these global conversations mean for our university in particular?
I feel as though that the university will eventually, though I'd say gradually, follow suit with what everyone else is kind of doing. That's why there is a renaming committee for some of the buildings. There are professors and staff and faculty, along with students, working together to come up with new names and to figure out like the true meaning or the history of the person that this building is named after. So eventually, I do feel like the university will make those changes. However, I really think that they will be slow and gradual, and they might not be something either me or Michael will see just with us graduating in the next year, and I graduate in the next 2 years. So I just don't necessarily feel like I'll see it, but hopefully we leave a legacy for people to continue to push the conversation to make sure that the university doesn't halt their initiatives to make those changes.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree in regard what you said too, Lauren. I don't think it's necessarily trendy per se. I know that probably was a bad choice of words, but with all that's going on, and we see so many different universities, states, they're taking down these monuments, and they're doing it. Some people are doing it in a way to protest or riot. In other ways, there's been peaceful ways of going about it. And it's basically because we're trying to figure out, why do we have these here? Why, yes, it has a historical premise to it. However, where's the other side of that story? And that's where the historians come into play. And I completely agree with, if we're going to take them down, then take them down. Because we know that they do have negative connotations. It continues to uphold a history that isn't fully fully told per se when it comes to, you know, the minority aspect of it. You know, us as minorities and Black and brown people, you know, we've been through so much, and you know, the systemic racism that we're going through is what is built and founded upon for this country, and realistically speaking. So, you know, when we see these things, we're trying to break down things that have been going on for over 200 years. You know, this isn't going to happen overnight. You know, and like Lauren was saying, me and her and the majority of us on this call, we might not be able to see that change per se right now within the next year, but it's something that can definitely be working towards. You know, as for myself, I do sit on the naming committee, and it's something that I look forward to when we can really start like digging in and trying to figure out how we can go about making, you know, better names for the buildings on campus, and you know, have a definitive purpose to it. There's the why, you know, why they're changing this. Why do we feel this needs to be changed? Is it because of what took place in 2020, or is it because of what has been happening in the past? Is it just, you know, because it's concurrent? You know, those are the conversations that we need to continue to have, so that when we do make these decisions, they're not decisions that are made in vain.
Definitely. And, you know, speaking about the why, you know, definitely that word, of course, is something that is rooted in just answering why those buildings are there. Why is that name there? Why are these spaces dedicated to these individuals? The why, speaking about the why, and the who is not included in this narrative. Who or the why are these people not included in these narratives definitely are something, as we're all having these conversations around, whether they're institutions as the university or museums or just public spaces, public institutions just in general. But speaking about the why definitely goes a long way. And so while we definitely understand that the path forward is indeed very, very long, as y'all all pointed out, we may not see some of the fruits of our labor now. We may see them 5 years or 20 years, but hopefully we do see them. How can the university community, the larger university community, share and support your work?
I feel as though they just have to be involved. They have to, the university per se has to hire faculty that represent us, that are able and want to stay around, giving, you know, minority professors tenure, making sure that there's someone who will be around for 30 plus years, someone who knows what I did as a student in 2020 that still might apply to a student in 2030 when they're still here and I'm far long gone. Just getting involved and making sure you stay involved and stay in contact with the new representatives for the organizations, the new executive boards, just making sure that you always come in and touch bases, whether it's on a semester basis or a year basis, but just making sure that you're always in the know of what this organization has in mind and what their mission is and their goals for that year.
Exactly. I think it just has to go into more of that, the retention after we graduate. You know, I'm very big on legacy. So, and for me, I know, and it's something that I'm pledging to myself, that I will continue to check on the organizations that I've left behind. You know, I've put in too much work for it to just go left. And I have full trust in the capabilities of whoever's going to continue to lead on that legacy. But if that means that I can continue to, you know, be able to push them and motivate them and be like, look, this is what, you know, this is what we've been pushing for. You know, you have to continue to inspire and be transformational to other individuals. You know, have to uplift and keep everybody going. You know, you can't just, one thing that I've noticed, especially within like our Black organizations, folks will graduate, get their kudos, and then they leave. And then they don't come back. They'll come back for homecoming. You know, we have to break that. You know, this is, you know, I've spent thousands of dollars, you know, through scholarships and even loans, you know, to come to this university. And I've put in the work that I've done because I've wanted to see it be better. So why would I leave after graduating and just disregard whatever I was what I put into it? So ultimately, like Lauren was saying, you know, we have to continue to just stay in touch, keep these things going, create maybe a panel of some sort within like the Christiana Smith Foundation Association or the AFA, something of that sort, where we can continue to interact on a regular basis and get people more involved. Because there's a lot of alum that are just kind of floating around, and they feel like they want to do something, but they feel like they don't know how to get in contact, or they might not have initiated that contact for whatever reason that might be. But sometimes if we have to, let's extend that olive branch beyond our means. If we need to continue to reach out and find ways for us to get alum involved so that we can continue to show them like, hey, this is what was going on in 2020 and before, and this is what's going on right now. In the future, whatever the case may be, we need your help. We need to have that. That even goes within the funding and things of that nature. Getting people involved and you're continuing to keep that relationship going is going to continue to push for that inclusivity and that diversity that we're pushing for right now.
Definitely. And, I think this kind of alludes to a conversation that I had previously about being in contact with the university, staying in contact with the university. This is your university, this is your alma mater once you graduate. Buying in that legacy work, definitely, if we want to change and continue those efforts of the university to be more inclusive, to be more diverse, be more equitable, be more accessible, definitely that work doesn't just simply happen overnight, as we're all seeing in this conversation. And so thank you for this part. And this part actually concludes the dialogue of this conversation. And so in the next part, for our audience, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, now is your time. You can unmute yourself, or you can post a question in the chat.
Good evening, everyone on the call. My name is Professor Theodore Foster. Thank you, Michael and Lauren, for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on the current moment in UL. And of course, thanks Trey and Professor Petru for your work in organizing this event. I have 3 questions that I want to try and keep short because it's been a really interesting dialogue. The first question regards white supremacy on campus and the language of Zoom bombing. I've been thinking a lot as you all talk about the Zoom bombs and the kind of spread effect it has in that moment and after. I certainly experienced that as I was gonna give a 12-minute kind of speech after someone else had been intentionally interrupted, right? So bomb tends to implicate a pretty violent act, and I don't know if Zoom bomb really captures the kind of racist, sexist, vile that was that moment. So the first question is, what's your experience with white supremacy on campus and or Lafayette? The second question is about leadership. Both of you are clearly self-identified leaders within your organizations. I think, as a historian of the civil rights movement, we often turn to Black charismatic male figures like King or Malcolm to think through the politics of the moment. And one of my heroes of that moment is Ella Baker, who often said, we need strong people, not strong people don't need a strong leader, right? And that Martin didn't make the movement made Martin. So the point is that a lot of organizing around Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives has stressed a leaderless, decentralized movement. So how do you all think about that kind of context on campus? What kind of ordinary everyday leaders exist, and or what's your orientation to leadership within Black organizations on campus? And the third question is about self-care. Clearly, this is a time of mourning and grief. We have some 220,000 people dead in this country from COVID. It's supposed to be a really, really, really deadly fall and winter. What are Black organizations doing to grieve, mourn collectively, individually, given your kind of statements about therapy, access on campus? What kind of self-care work are y'all committed to or doing? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer number 3 first. So when it comes to with the self-care aspect of it, I'm a big mental health advocate. It's something that I've been doing now for about 2.5, 3 years. I do deal with anxiety and depression. So for me, it's really just finding solace in solitude. It's something that I tell my members all the time, and I break it down basically like this. We all have our pitfalls. We all have our moments when we feel idle in that instance, or, there's a time when I might feel like I'm depressed, especially being a leader, and so many people look up to you and they expect you to do so much. It's taxing. I was just telling my board recently, I've been dealing with, trying to, I graduate December 8th. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. But it's so much, being a student leader. I sit on 4 e-boards of organizations on campus. On top of that, I work, and then I do stuff in the community, and I'm a full-time student, and I manage it, and I've always managed it, but that's a way that I deal with my anxiety. I am a high functioning Black man that has severe anxiety that deals with depression. So for me, I find ways to cope with it positively. I've gotten into meditation. I play instruments as well too. So, I find my happiness in my avocations. I love to travel. I'm the type of student, especially since we've been virtual, even though we've had COVID and stuff, I've been going home quite a bit just to go be with my family, my friends back home, seeing them, that alone is really what keeps pushing me. On top of that, seeing the world is a good thing too. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that right now with COVID. So, you figure that way, you figure ways to get around it to the best of your capability. You just got to be smart about how you travel, but aside from that, I also find music to be a muse for me as well. I love music. I love different genres. I find ways to hear artists, they sing or they might rap or they're just poetic in what they're telling you, they're telling you a story, and I try to resonate with it. How can I use this music or this instrumentation to motivate me, to uplift me? That's my own way of doing a form of self-care. Taking time out to really take care of yourself too. I know a lot of times, as student leaders and even as administration and faculty, we do so much for everybody else, but we're falling short on taking care of ourselves. So in that instance, sometimes we need to take a break. I tell my boards all the time, if I'm feeling down, I let them know. That transparency is key. I'm like, hey guys, I'm not having the best week. I'm going through a lot right now. I'll talk to you guys in a second about it, but I just need time to decompress. Turn your phone off. Everybody's gonna be okay. You have to tell yourself that. I know you feel like you might letting people down and stuff, but that's why you have a board and cabinet. They're supposed to pick you up when you're down. So in that instance, take that time out for yourself. And I think then when you come to realize that you can't be a solid leader or a transformational leader when you're down in the dumps. How am I going to lead someone when I can't even lead myself to good health? So that's how I would answer number 3. Number 2, can you repeat the question again, Professor Theodore?
Yeah, number 2 is about leader-full versus leader-less movements. People often think that Black Lives Matter is a leader-less movement because there's no identifiable single person, but folk in Black Lives Matter, movement Black Lives have attested to the fact that there's a broader base focus on building up strong people who don't need strong leaders. So in terms of locally, UL, what does that look like? What are methods of leadership that, right, like you're saying, don't necessarily depend upon the individual to carry the load, but build that work out?
Okay, so to answer that, I see the connection and the ties that you're coming from now. Like back in the civil rights movement, we had Dr. Martin Luther King. He was the forefront for change and motivation, but he had those individuals behind him, backing him and strengthening this movement. He was pretty much like what a president is. As a president, our position is we do a lot of the big things. We do meetings like this. We're the face of an organization. In times where we're at now, I think there's multiple faces. Whereas, in the civil rights time, it was just maybe 1 to 3. And I think that is where our difference is in our era of civil rights. So to answer your question, I see on campus, we do as much as we can be to be a unified front. And, there's some individuals or some organization we might push a little bit harder to get these things done effectively. But to attack the issue that we have going on right now, I think it takes all of us to do it. It's not just one person sitting here or, pushing for that change. We all have to be on one collective accord. And that's the only way things are going to change. Granted, the civil rights movement that took place in the 60s, those times it got where we are today. We had that movement, that pivotal change, but we're back to it again, but it's with a different generation. So how can we move forward from that with who we have now. You know, we're younger, we have a different mindset, you know, we're a lot more free and transparent with a lot of things in the majority aspect. So it's like, okay, how can we take this, move from it, cultivate it, and then make that change and be effective to see the difference? Okay, and then the last question, what is Zoom bombing integration? Okay, so the Zoom bombing. As we all know, the Black Student Union, we had our first town hall meeting and we were Zoom bombed. It's very traumatic, to say the least. A lot of my members are still kind of traumatized by it. I personally, I was quite traumatized for it for a little bit. I did go talk to my therapist about it because it was something that I would have never thought I would experience in today's day and age. I do think they're racially motivated. I think they're hate crime motivated. I'll say that because in the history of it so far is, you know, we've had, you know, smaller minority organizations that have been Zoom bombed. And I feel as though these instances, they're happening because of the climate of the country and of the world. We're living in very interesting times, to say the least. So when things like this happen, there's some form of motivation. It's just not people just doing it as a joke. They're doing this to make a statement. And, you know, when you have a university like our university that's very progressive in the movement for change within civil rights, social injustice, the LGBTQIA, whatever the case may be, really just that diversity and inclusion, we're going to get attacked, especially when we're doing things so massive and pivotal. When it might get some type of national recognition, it speaks volumes. And I say national recognition because during the summer, the Black Student Union, we did a big video that was talking about, like, we're just tired. We're tired of the racial injustice that's going on. That received almost 1 million views on Facebook. It made its way around Facebook and it's still making its way around Facebook. And, you know, we have, you know, people have donated to our organization time and time again, just because they appreciate what we're doing and we're moving forward to try and be a change locally. And then, you know, just seeing that, you know, we're young, and a lot of times people fail to realize a lot of the changes that takes place, it happens on a college campus first. And I think people neglect that a lot of times. You know, they see, you know, like Dr. King, you know, when they had the civil rights movement, you know, they were older than what we are, but they all started, and usually in basements or whatever the case may be, in a college, on a college campus. You know, and that's something that we have to acknowledge. We are the leaders and the innovators of the future. And that's the reason why we have to put in so much work and effort to see that change. So when they see that change, individuals might not like it because it's hindering what they have already had or what they intend on having. So that's why I believe Zoom bombing is, and when you say bomb, like you were saying, it's more terroristic. I do believe that. I do believe it's very terroristic. I believe they are hate crime motivated, and it needs to stop.
Well, you know, Michael, I found myself agreeing the whole time, definitely, with what you were saying. You know, how can a student leader lead without being honest and open and having those conversations about where they are in this time? Definitely, of course. And, you know, thinking about this, and it's shame on me as a history major not realizing that, you know, SNCC, you know, as Ella Baker with started as, of course, in those basements of those college campuses. Freedom fighters, the Freedom Riders, same situation. Greensboro with the sit-ins, college campus, of course. Thinking about those movements, you know, college campuses serve as that unique space, that unique institution that has that so much of a vested interest in both universities and in student life, definitely. Lauren, would you like to weigh in on Dr. Foster's question?
Yes, so I believe his third question about just mental health and like overall how we're doing, I am very big on not stressing my executive board out. I refuse to be stressed out. My members, when we do meetings, you know, if there's a topic we're going over, we do current events at our meeting. If it's a topic that might be a little too heavy, I'll forever and always ask, hey, are y'all okay? Are y'all comfortable? Where are y'all at mentally? Would y'all like to speak about this? If it's too much, we can move on. If it's not, we can go ahead and discuss that topic. So just making sure that you have like those outlets, something aside from school or being inside. I'm very big on plants. So like I have a lot of plants in my room, just to like, you know, circulate the oxygen, get things going. I like to be outside some afternoons when I'm doing my work, switch up the scenery when I'm doing certain things. So I just kind of encourage that. Also push for like counseling as well. I know a lot of people can't necessarily like afford it, which is why I'm very big on pushing for the university to get another minority counselor in Saucier. So that's just some of the things that like I just kind of take into account when it comes to mental health. And then the second question, do you mind repeating that again?
Sorry, it was about leaderful versus leaderless movements. NAACP clearly has a role in leadership. What are your thoughts on leadership given the context of Black Lives Matter, focusing on building broad-based local leadership and not just any one individual?
I'm actually very big on that. There are a lot of things I know within Lafayette when Trayford Pellerin was murdered, where there were just organizations coming out doing this, and you know, a lot of people were coming and contacting UL NAACP or Lafayette NAACP asking for information and resources on that, and we weren't able to provide anything because there were so many smaller like new organizations that, you know, were made within 3 to 4 days to a week that were creating protests, or, you know, hey, we're going to meet up here and we're going to do this, and that's perfectly fine. However, it's always I guess you would say it's kind of tricky when you have multiple organizations that have the same goals. Whereas like we love and we're always with open arms for anyone, regardless of you being a member or not. Hey, if you have an idea, if you want to get this done, just come to us and we can try to make it happen. Nationally, student chapters like youth NAACP chapters weren't really allowed to have protests without going through like national guidelines plus state guidelines plus the university's guidelines, making sure that everyone was okay. We had to make sure there was insurance, there was this, there was that. So we weren't able to, but we were able to endorse it, be a part of, but not necessarily, you know, represent or wear NAACP, but to know that your members and your leaders are out there still being a part of that movement. Yeah, that's kind of answers that question for me.
Thank you all both.
You're welcome.
Definitely, and thank you all for answering that question. Are there any other questions, comments, or suggestions for our panelists today?
Hey, Chair, I think we have a question from Lauren.
Got you right now. From Lauren, what are your opinions about the riots connected to Black Lives Matter movement?
Okay, so in regard to, can you be a little bit more specific when you mean by riots?
Whenever I say riots, I'm referring to the local businesses that are getting destroyed, Target's getting looted. I've seen a lot of that on the news, and I'm just wondering your opinions on that.
Okay, so me personally, I'm not with the looting business of riots. When it comes to protesting, I believe in organized protesting. I feel like it gets more things done. However, I understand and see why people do the things that they do in regards to rioting that is in connection to Black Lives Matter. One, there are connections, and then two, some people take advantage of what's going on in that instance to do things for their own personal gain. And that's the contradiction of rioting to some form or fashion. Because in a lot of cases, these people who are rioting, there might not even be for the Black Lives Matter cause. They're for themselves. They see this as an opportunity. They're opportunists. So when it comes to, you know, when you see riots and things like that, it's sickening when people are tearing down their own communities. However, when you speak to someone who might be for the cause or they're more militant than others in regard to rioting, they break it down in layman's terms basically like this. They're rioting and they're looting because they feel as though the corporations in which that we buy our goods and services from are against the cause to begin with. So they're getting back what they've already put in. So that's their belief on that. It might not be, that's not my belief, and that might not be yours, or it might not be anybody's on this call. However, when it comes to the connection to the racial injustice that you're speaking of, I don't think I agree with you. I don't think it's a strategy or a tactic to push down on Black Lives Matter. However, I do believe people ultimately are just taking advantage of that opportunity when they see a peaceful protest that's going on to be able to benefit themselves in the long run. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
And to add in, I was reading Dr. Foster's comment. If y'all haven't read the chat yet, that's in there. But I believe I'm not personally like for riots or looting or for violence. I'm never going to like endorse that or say like that's a thing. But you also have to come into understanding that, okay, I'm marching, I'm protesting, and still all over the country, my Black brothers and sisters are still being killed, they're still being murdered. It's still on video, and we're still going to trials where we know the verdict of the cases. So then it becomes anger and it becomes frustration. And I'm not saying that rioting is the way to go about that, but once you kind of put a thought process to it, you kind of start thinking like, hey, okay, now they're trying to get more attention. They're trying to like make a statement in a sense, but there are also outside sources. I know there have been like some cases and instances where they've said that there was actually no one connected to the racial injustice marches or protests that actually started the fires at certain companies or business. It was actually other bystanders or people who just wanted to make the movement look a certain way. So I think you have to look at it from a lot of different angles before like it becomes, oh, this is what Black Lives Matter promotes. This is what the racial injustice protests are for. They're all about rioting and looting. Like you have to really sit back and think and pay attention to all of the facts. And also really read into what's going on, because I know a lot of news sources are biased. This can be written this way and this can be written another way. So find a, non-biased news source to read from, or, get your local news from, or, just kind of keep up with the movement if that's in your interest.
Definitely, Lauren and Michael, I thank you for answering that question. Are there any other questions, comments, or suggestions as of now from our audience? So from Dr. Petru, what are some of the news sources you rely on, Lauren and Michael?
Okay, so news sources that I rely on, I look at all of them, honestly. And the reason being is if I look at all of them, then I can be able to perceive what makes the most logical sense. There's some that are very right, there's some that are very left. So finding that balance and seeing, things for what they are, cut and dry, is the best way to go about it. I'm very big on getting the realistic responses to things. I try my best not to be very left or very right when it comes to trying to figure out what's going on, because a lot of times everything has some form of propaganda, or it's there to downplay what's really going on. And you can't do that. I need to see what things are for what it's worth. I need to see the validity behind it. And the best way to do that is to really just look at everything that you have laid out there. Because if you look at something, you're going to see, you're like, okay, this doesn't even make sense. This doesn't even sound logically correct. So you take that, okay, we'll put that over here. We go to the next one. Okay, this seems a little too radical. This doesn't make that much sense. Okay, then there's one that might be a little bit in between that gives you more of the factual evidence that you need. So then you can kind of take from everything that you've learned, and then you can get a good general knowledge of what is taking place.
That's more so where, especially me being a president of an organization that is not neither left or right, or we don't promote any certain thing, I definitely pay attention to a lot of news sources. I can watch CNN one day, I can watch Fox the other day, I'm not very big on like watching local news just because I'm not always like up to date, but I'm more so kind of like I'll read the newspaper. So that's just kind of like my sources. I really just, try to be well-rounded when it comes to what I'm perceiving as far as like what information is, and what I'm believing to be true news. And I'm also someone who I kind of like both sides of the story, even if, I feel like I agree strongly with this one. Okay, I kind of want to see this perspective. What do you think of this, or how do you perceive it? And then it kind of gives you like your own judgment and your own mindset.
Definitely, and thank you for answering that question, especially as, of course, we're in the midst of an election, asking those questions, thinking about those issues, thinking about those candidates, putting them together and thinking about those choices. Definitely speaks volume, having multiple sources to look through. So definitely, to conclude our conversation for today, Lauren and Michael, can you please provide us with some closing remarks?
I would just like to say, first and foremost, thank y'all for putting on this webinar. It's so beneficial and it's so necessary. I'm hoping that in the future, it's still around for certain students to pay attention to and to watch, not just the students of 2020 and this semester, that it's something someone in the future can come back and look on and, see possibly how far we've gotten. The things that me and Michael talk about today, hopefully they've changed. So I'm just grateful to be a part of that conversation and to just have a word in where we feel we are as far as sitting at the table.
Yes, I just want to say big thank you for this opportunity to be on this panel. I love having conversations like this because it gives everybody that seat that we've been talking about, a seat at that table. Understanding what's going on, remaining transparent, being organic with yourself, the individuals at the table, and the ones that aren't even present. We as a people, and when I mean by people, I mean as human beings, we need to understand that we all deserve rights that are equitable. It should just be equal in that aspect. And ultimately, I just want to leave everybody with this. As a Black man, I feel as though, no, I don't feel, I know I, as an individual, deserve and should have the same rights as an ally or my white counterpart. See me for who I am, not the color of my skin. See me for the leader that I am. See me as the individual that wants to see change in the world. See me as the person that wants to continue to have conversations with other individuals beyond their sexuality, the color of their skin, their religion, whatever ethnic background they come from. See me as a human being. Because at the end of the day, when we all die, we have the same bones in instance. So it's just like, let's be realistic. We shouldn't have to go through the things that we're going through or having these conversations, but here we are. With that being said, continue to be inspirational, transformational, continue to uplift one another and see people for who they are and not what they look like.
Definitely. And thank you all so much. I mean, once again, thank you so much for answering and coming to this conversation. The work, like I said before, that y'all are doing as student leaders here on campus is very much needed and very much appreciated. And y'all are doing a great work, awesome job. And honestly, as a student here on campus, your work definitely provides a place for everyone. And so definitely thank y'all so much for this conversation. Dr. Petru.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to echo the comments in the chat. I learned so much from this. I know as a faculty member and a member of UL, I really valued everything that you had to say. And I'm so honored that you took the time to share all of your experience and thoughts with us. And I think this is so important. And I only hope that we can continue keeping these conversations going. And for us at the Gilbo Center, we have a third webinar coming up in November. And we're already planning on continued conversations, especially with thinking about who's being brought to the table. So we've started our conversations for what we want to do in the spring. And I think you're right, this is a long road ahead and we have to keep our commitment to that. And I am so grateful to you all for taking the time to really teach us. I learned so much from you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. And thank you to all of our attendees, and thank you to Trey for doing such a great job moderating. So I wish everyone a wonderful night, and I look forward to seeing you in our future conversations. Bye.